Well, Tara, thank you so much for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Tara Foster. I am an Australian American. I live in Sydney, Australia, and I'm a TV producer, and I'm interested in space.
So what does a TV producer do?
I basically make stories. So I'll come up with an idea, or somebody will have an idea, and I basically look for the story within that idea, and then I'll either go out and shoot it, or I'll take that footage and bring it back, and then edit it into something that's a little bit coherent.
Um, yeah, it's kind of amazing to think, with the perspective that this might be watched by somebody in Mars, you know, and just thinking about that being 100 years from now and how much media has changed in the past 100 years. I mean, like 100 years ago, there's no TV and no idea of TV producer. Um, how do you see like that role kind of changing over time?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Everything just kind of evolves. And I mean, who would have known that we would be speaking live on a computer from one side of the earth to the other? So I think it's limitless. I think if you can dream it, you can do it. And I have no idea what the future is going to look like and how we're going to be seeing it, but I'm very excited for it. And I can only imagine them taking this, and this is kind of like almost like the Rosetta Stone. They're just looking at this content, and it'll be like just like metalworks or something like that. How we look at that. So it'll be very interesting to see if and how they use this footage.
Yeah, I'm hoping that a high schooler on Mars is doing a project, and I hope I've given her enough to get an A on her project. That's sort of the
Oh,
goal.
I think you're okay. I think they're gonna have more than enough footage. That's always the thing too.
Um, so you say you're interested in space. Can you track that back to a particular moment in your life?
Yes, I can actually. So um I mean, I was always interested in it, but I wasn't as interested in it as I am now. But let me explain what I mean by that. As a kid, we're always looking up. We have stars on our ceilings that glow in the dark. You know what NASA is. You hear that people go to space, on a basically a van. Like, it was just really interesting as a kid thinking about it in the 80s and 90s. And then it kind of went a little bit dormant for a while for me. And then I was in the US and I was going to grad school, and I was looking for story ideas. And I was actually a little bit bored in grad school. So what I would do is on my long weekends, I would drive down to Florida, and I would go to rocket launches. So I did something that's called NASA Social, and NASA Social invites people from, it used to be around the world, but now it's just Americans, to cover a rocket launch. So I applied, and somehow I got in and I went. But the thing is, the launch scrubbed. So I went back home, and then they called us back up, and then I went back, and then that launch scrubbed. But at this point, I'm kind of becoming a pro at going to these events and live tweeting and reporting and meeting everyone. And then I went to the third one, and the rocket actually went off. So I actually saw the launch, and it was a night launch. And that's when I realized that what we're doing as humanity takes so many people, and it's not easy. And there are never any guarantees. And it was just such a metaphor for humanity, just watching this launch. And that it's like I had an overview effect. Astronauts talk about seeing the Earth and having an overview effect. I had an overview effect by watching a rocket launch, because I realized how many people, how many cultures, how many things, how many ideas, how many dreams were involved to make this launch. And that's when I realized the importance of space. And I kind of went on my very own magical mystery tour around the world covering space events. And I have been gifted with so many amazing adventures because of it. So long story short, I wasn't really interested in the beginning. I never really wanted to be an astronaut, but when I saw a launch for the first time, I realized that this was important, and now I'm in it.
Do you remember which launch it was?
It was CRX-5. So it was the SpaceX CRX-5, and it was the first attempt to land on the barge, which failed.
Well, that's amazing. I remember having a party for my son whenever he was in middle school about the same time to watch one of SpaceX launches. We invited all his friends, we got together, and it scrubbed too. So we ended up watching a replay. But he kind of walked away from that experience saying, "Oh, rocket launches never happen on time." So he's like, it's hard to get him excited and worked up about it. But
It's a great lesson in patience. I think in the world that we're in today, we forget about that. And with a rocket launch, you have to be patient because your payload, the stuff you're sending to space, is expensive. And sometimes you don't have a plan B of that payload in case it blows up, or sending humans. So I think it's really important life lesson to know that in a rocket launch and in life, it's okay to stop, pause, reset, and then try again.
exactly, yeah. A failure is not a failure unless you stop. Otherwise,
Exactly.
it's just a setback.
Exactly. You said it.
So, not everybody agrees that space is important, especially human space flight. They have some doubts. Um, how would you kind of go about kind of articulating the value of space?
Well, there's a lot of things that we now have on Earth that is thanks to space. And I think a lot of people forget that because when you're in space, you're in a very small closed environment. It's a closed, like they call it a closed environment. And you basically need to make things work within that closed environment up there because you don't have the luxury of space like you do here. You don't have the luxury of gravity. So things are a little bit different. So when you're in space, you actually need to problem solve these things in order to make them work. And then a lot of that technology actually comes back to Earth. For example, like water refining, like making water out of air. That was all thanks to Mir. They did that on Mir. They were able to take water out of the air and create, water out of the air and create something to drink, and then also, or water purification. The Russians purify their water on the ISS as well. Also, pumps for insulin. That's all because of space. There's a lot of technology that's being made at the moment, like convectional ovens, which uses airflow. You can't use airflow in space. So it's like, how do you bake a cookie in space? You have to, like, there's just so many things people don't think about. And everyone says, oh, we need to worry about the Earth first. But we actually are worrying about the Earth by going to space, by learning to see how things work in space. So I think people really forget that, like for instance, food production, making food in space. You don't really grow food. Like, how do you solve that problem? If you're going on a long haul flight to Mars, how are you going to feed your crew? You can't have pods along the way because the radiation is eventually going to break down all the nutrients in that food. So what's another way of doing it? Well, you can grow your own food, but how do you grow your own food for a crew of say 20? You need some kind of pod. And I've seen on the ground as well, people creating these pods, but these pods now are helping cities. So people, like I said, people are forgetting that everything that we do in space is actually benefiting us here on Earth. It is benefiting humanity. It's making us better. And it's also giving us something to look forward to. It gives us hope. It gives us something to dream about, because I think on Earth, I think sometimes we forget that. And I think it's really important to have dreams. It's what keeps us going as humanity, as a society. It gives us something to look forward to, especially in the world we're in now. With COVID, we have a virus that's going around the Earth and everyone's panicking all the time. But if you can break away from that and have something out there that you're looking at and dreaming about, it gives you a break from that reality, and it gives you something to work toward and to look forward to. So there's like a little overview of all the things that are in my brain.
That is wonderful. Um, yeah, no, I think you're so right about the need to dream and the dream big and looking at the stars and thinking about where we might go and all these things. But as I think about our modern day, where we have social media with algorithms that are kind of keeping us with inside of our bubble and trying to keep us engaged and maybe agitated and all these types of things, um, it really feels like that maybe we're not dreaming as much as we did, say, back in the 60s and 70s about how the life could be. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think when we look back upon the 60s and that time, I think we romanticize it because that's what we do as humans. We're always looking back and romanticizing about things and how things were different or better. I actually don't think they're any different or better. It's just all how we manage it. I understand that there's algorithms, but we can also change the algorithms by not looking at that material either or interacting with more positive accounts. I do a lot of stuff on social media. I tweet heaps. Um, and I've actually changed the way I guess, ingest news and interact with people, because I want to have a positive life. Yeah, there's a lot of negativity out there, and I understand that. And I'm very cluey when it comes to the news. But also, I have to keep my wits about myself as well. And so I interact with all the positive people. I try to post about positive things. I have a lot of positivity in my life, but I'll also say, like, if I have a bad day, I'll have a bad day and I'll have a whinge about it. But I always bring it back to that positivity. So I think looking back and thinking that they had it better or whatever is not necessarily the case because they had different struggles as well. But it's all in how we manage those expectations and manage our lives and manage our thoughts. Um, and then, yeah, it just makes it a bit easier. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, it's all about being intentional, being
Yeah.
aware and saying, I'm not going to be owned by the content that's presented to me. I'm going to go out there and be thoughtful about what I'm getting. So everything
Yeah.
you're saying makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Totally. I get that you totally just explained it.
Um, so I think kids back in like the 60s and 70s, just to kind of probe on one little other aspect of this, really liked science fiction. And I feel like kids today really like fantasy, magic and what have you. And I was reading the definition because there's a lot of controversy about what's science fiction versus fantasy. And I heard an explanation that really resonated with me. I wanted to run by you and get your thoughts on what it might mean if people back then like science fiction a lot more than people like fantasy now. And the difference is science fiction has the premise that the world is controllable and that we can control it. Whereas fantasy has the premise that the world is out of control and we can't control it. I was just wondering what you thought about that.
What a reflection on this day and age. The world is uncontrollable right now. We have airplanes that stop flying, and won't. We have loved ones that live overseas that we can't see. They can't get into the country and they can't get out of the country. Um, so I actually agree that the world is not controllable. Um, it was a very different time, I think, back then. I mean, I can't say because I wasn't there, but um, yeah, it does feel very unknown and out of control. I think the economy was more positively skewed for all, whereas now it jumps around every day. Uh, we live in a gig society, which means that you're only as good as your last job. I work in a gig society as a freelance TV producer. So I basically have to hustle for work all the time. I don't know where I'm going to be next week. I don't have anything lined up. So there is a lot of unknown out there. And I actually think that's fascinating that um, what a lot of children and adults are consuming with the fantasy, which is the unknown world, it's true. It's a total reflection of what we have right now.
But I mean, there's also a resignation and acceptance of the unknown um, maybe an excuse not to dig or to figure out with fantasy, in the sense that you go to the microwave and you give it a magical spell and somehow it heats up your food, and that's all the interaction you need to know about it, right? Or you go to the computer, you know the special magical keywords to make it do stuff, but you have no, you're like, there's no way I can understand what's really going on. And maybe that limits us in terms of being able to maintain and build kind of our world.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. Also airplanes, like it's all magic. That's what makes them lift. Yeah, well, maybe it's also because that right now we have everything at our fingertips. Entertainment is on my phone and it comes in a 3-minute video and I can scroll through it. And if I don't want something, I can keep going. And so maybe, and I mean, I'm just speculating here because I'm not a scientist, but maybe it's because of the way we get our content. I mean, I have 240 characters that I can write as a microblog. I used to have a blog. Well, I actually still have a blog, but I haven't written on it in ages because I microblog now. So I write a thread of stuff, idea after idea after idea after idea. I actually use that as a roadmap. I take that and then I chuck it into my blog and then I expand on it. It's really fascinating. So it's almost like we are given in life the highlights version now. And then we're just not taking that next step further. I guess we're not thinking it through. But yeah, that's quite fascinating that, we have all this information, but we're not asking the reason why. And I can't tell you why.
Yeah, and indeed. Well, there's been I was wondering if you might have seen a rocket launch closer to your current home. Have you ever gone to New Zealand and watched Rocket Lab?
No, no. I was speaking with them a while ago, but it never happened. Yeah, and also then COVID kind of happened, and so New Zealand's completely closed. You can't get in at all. But I've seen rocket launches at NASA a few times. So, and I was interested in going to French Guiana, but that hasn't happened either. So, yeah, I've mostly just only been to the US. I am looking at going to Russia, but we'll see.
Um, I mean, New Zealand kind of, and Rocket Labs, I find to be really fascinating. I've talked to a lot of people in like Egypt and Pakistan and um, Argentina and Chile and these places that don't have a human spaceflight program and don't have kind of orbital launch capabilities. And I look at New Zealand, which has Rocket Labs, and I'm like, it's really not the size of your economy or kind of where you are. I mean, how did Peter Beck do it? And why aren't there like Peters in the rest of these countries?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the whole cliche saying that space is hard. We have the Gilmore brothers actually here in Australia that have started a rocket company, Gilmore Technologies. And so they're trying to get a launch facility and a rocket off launched, no pun intended. And we have 3 facilities here in Australia at the moment. But Australia used to have a space program a very long time ago. And then with the NASA and the Brits and everything, but then it just kind of disintegrated. That was out in Woomera. It was mostly a secretive thing. It's really cool when you're driving through the outback. The freeway will just open up to a giant runway. So then you're like, did I make a wrong turn? Why am I on this runway? So we now have a space program here in Australia, but I think it just takes time. As for the private sector, I think it just takes time, money, and interest. And yeah, there's key players around the world, but space is hard and it takes, like I said, time and money. And so I think it's like the next big industry in the world. And I actually think it will help out a lot of countries that are struggling a bit, especially with technology. You know, satellites are the things that keep us connected. It's how I'm talking to you. We can track planes and shipments of stuff and cars, and it's fascinating. But it's just getting into it, you know, and it just takes a lot of money to start it up, and you actually need the ideas of what it is. So as for Peter, I just think he saw a perfect opportunity to go, and the Kiwis embraced it. There's a great facility up there. You know, there's nothing around. There's cows in the field. And when you go and when there's a launch, it's cool. And he's got the smart people around him. It's even like, even in New Zealand, they have Weta, which is a television company. That's where they made Lord of the Rings, you know?
Wow.
So, and all the other big films. So New Zealand's just kind of like this little powerhouse in the middle of the Pacific. It's quite creative. Maybe that's the other thing. You need really good creative minds, not just the money, but also the creativity and the dreamers to actually do it, because it's a big risk.
Yeah, just talking about New Zealand itself. Have you ever been to New Zealand? Like, I know not to, you haven't. I heard that pretty much every single geological feature on Earth is represented in New Zealand. I was
Mm.
wondering if that's true.
New Zealand's the youngest country in the world because it keeps growing. They keep having volcanic eruptions. So you have Australia, which is next door, which is the oldest land. We have rocks from bazillions of years ago, and it's just quite old and kind of crusty. And then, yeah, New Zealand right next door is just the newest one. So I can understand if they do.
Um, so do you remember Artemis Day back in 2019?
Yes.
And I felt a palpable excitement about getting people on the moon in 2024, and it really felt like things were moving and it was really going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you felt the same at that time, if you remember back to then.
I was actually a little bit kind of like, oh, what is this? Oh, what are we doing? Oh, interesting. Okay, how are we going to do this? Like there was an interest, but also there was a lot of questions because yeah, we had been there. 13 people have been to the moon, but how are we going to change the technology, or how is it changed for us to get there? And then I just kind of started doing the research, and I found it quite interesting. Um, like the Leo module that will be in space as like kind of like the piggyback to get to the moon, and how they're doing the loops and the tests around the moon. And I just found it all kind of cool. And then the spacesuits, and I'm very interested in technology. I've actually seen the Orion capsule in person. So this is kind of funny. Our launch at NASA had scrubbed, and basically scrub means that they canceled the launch. So they took all of us, and they didn't tell us at the time. We went to this hangar, but what we didn't know is the just earlier that morning, the Orion capsule, it just drove across country because it landed out in the Pacific. It drove in the, under the cover of darkness in the middle of the night across the country. So nobody knew. They're going through all the small little towns and ended up at that facility and dropped it off. And the doors opened, and we got to see the Orion capsule and learn about that and how it's going to, take people to deep space and stuff like that. So it was like kind of a cool moment. But yeah, it's just like the technology behind it, like how will astronauts protect themselves against radiation, and the Orion capsule is how that will happen. It's actually rated to go to deep space. So yeah, it was just interesting. I just had a lot of questions of how, why, what are we using, how are we getting there, who is going. Yeah.
Well, how realistic at that time did you think the 2024 time frame was?
Oh, well, see, I don't even know if 2024 is doable. I know Elon was talking about the BFR and doing these long haul flights from, say, New York to Sydney in 23 minutes in 2023. And we are currently in 2021 right now. So, I mean, look, anything is possible, but it's always good to put some sort of date on things so you have something to work towards, whether or not it happens. Um, is 2024 a good timing? I don't know, but is it good to have a time? Yes.
Well, and over the past few weeks and months, we've had a number of developments, which um, has really made my project a little awkward since I'm counting down to the end of 2024. Um, we had the Office of Inspector General report from NASA saying that there's no way the spacesuits are going to be ready by 2024, and so that would probably be 2025, 2026. We had the NASA administrator coming out and saying officially it's going to be 2025. We had the OIG coming out again saying that they think it's probably closer to 2027. Do you think we're going to get to the moon in this decade?
I think one way or another we will, but it sounds to me like they all need a production manager, like someone that will keep them in line with the dates. So because it's kind of really bad to give out all these days, hey, we're going to do this, hey, we're going to do that. It's like, guys, you all need to talk together. We're all one team. So yeah, I really think they need to invest in a project manager just to kind of have an end date and to work through what they need to do in order to achieve it. I think that's always been the biggest problem with NASA. Like there's so many different places around the US, which is good, that handle different parts of, say, a spaceship. But the thing is, you all need to come together to work together in order to launch something and land something on another, celestial being. The beauty is we can do it because we have the ISS. So the ISS shows how you can work across multiple cultures and languages and ideas and everything and make something that is just spectacular. So they did it. I can't understand why we can't do it. We're all the same people and we're all on the same team. And I think, yeah, in the next 10 years, yeah, I definitely think it's going to happen.
Um, what do you think about us going back to the moon? I mean, what do you hope to get out of it?
I think the question should be, why did we ever stop going to the moon? Why? I think we should have kept going. It's like going to a foreign country that you've never been to or whatever, and just going, I'm never going back. It's just, you went there to collect a stamp. You didn't go there to learn about it. And to like live it. And that's one thing. I mean, maybe I'm just being, because this is just how I am. When I travel, I actually travel fully within me. I just don't go somewhere and just get a stamp and leave and say I've been there. I actually move to places. Like I've moved to the Netherlands, I've moved to Ireland, I've moved to Australia, and like I encapsulate myself within the culture and the feeling and the environment. And it kind of just saddens me that we had this beautiful opportunity to keep going and to stay on the moon, but we just like left. It's like, guys, it's there, learn about it. This is a perfect opportunity for you to learn more about how we are as humans, not just physically, but also psychologically, because you're just so far. You can see the earth. Like there's just so many layers within this. We never should have left. We should have stayed. But then again, it comes down to the whole time, money, and dreams thing that we were talking about before. I think the dreams are there, but we are also missing out on the money aspect and the time that people have to give to it. So yeah, I just think we should never have left, and we should have just stayed on the moon and just kind of really started living it and breathing it and understanding it and why. It's there. It fluctuates with our earth. Like our tides change because of it. We look to it. It's in all our history and art, and it's a part of us. And we had this golden opportunity to stay there, and we walked away. We flew away.
Why do you think we went to the moon in the first place?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. I think firstly, because it's been ingrained in our psyche since, we existed. So historically that, but also it was just kind of like the Americans were challenged by the Russians and they kind of went, oh, let's win this. It was just, I think it was very much a winning thing, which is sad, but also it lit a fire to get us there.
But I guess that being the reason, isn't it more interesting that there was an Apollo 12 that we actually went a second time instead of that we stopped after landing 6 times?
Yeah, I'm that's the one that flew around the back. So unless I'm getting it confused with Apollo 8.
Apollo 8 went around the moon and just came back, didn't land. But
Okay, cool.
yeah.
So Apollo, what did Apollo 12 do? Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Oh, it was just the second moon landing. So Apollo 11 was the first one, and then Apollo 12 was the second one. And Apollo 13 was supposed to be the third one, but they had the issue.
Yeah. And then there was supposed to be more after that. Sorry, I can't really speak for that because I'm not very clear on the history of it. But I know that there were supposed to be more missions, but then they did stop. But I think it would have just fizzled out anyway.
Yeah, and Apollo 17 was the last time actually. So that was actually the first time that we sent a geologist to the moon. Can you believe we waited
Yeah.
until the sixth moon landing to actually send a geologist?
Yeah, and it's very interesting because they never really, and this was the point. So this is like social, like when you think about the internet being built, the internet was built and it was mostly just the bolts, of putting the internet together and transferring data packets. We are now adding in the bells and whistles of that to the internet with social media. So what was the point of this story? So, okay, yeah. So when we were sending people to the moon, we were just sending people that could actually go there and survive. And then it went on to, oh, well, we can now send a geologist and this kind of, but then I think now, since we're kind of like evolving and we have the time and more money, we can start sending the poets and the dreamers and the artists up there. And then they will be able to take all that information that even the scientists have, but put it in a more refined messaging, I guess. So everyone can experience it. And I think that's what it's missing. And I've noticed that actually a lot in social media as well. You have these scientists that are wonderful scientists and great at their jobs. They just can't communicate it. They need people like us that can actually take their big science stuff and translate it into things that everyone understands without losing the science. So I think that's what we're now going into with the space realm. Like people will be able to actually understand, because I don't think people are really understanding what we're doing of going to space and why the importance of it is. I mean, if you're asking, or saying, oh, well, we should be worried about the Earth first, they don't actually understand. It hasn't been communicated to them the importance of space. So I think we're entering the new phase where the people, the dreamers and the translators can go and bring back the messaging back to society and humanity.
So are you familiar with Dear Moon?
Dear Moon, the Dear Moon project. Yes, he was from Japan and it was with Elon Musk. Yes, I am not entirely sure what is happening with that project right now.
But just the concept of taking 9 artists, sending them around the moon for them to come back, for them to absorb that experience,
Yeah.
of seeing Earth from so far, and then come back and essentially create some art to make us all feel it.
I think it's so important that average people get to go to these things. And I think I'm so thankful that NASA Social exists because it gave it a regular person like me the opportunity to see what these people do and to see a rocket launch. And I got to see it firsthand and be in the room with actual astronauts and scientists not many people have that opportunity, but it was such a gift that I was given that I was absolutely able to take that gift and to tell other people about it. And I just think it's so important that everybody has this opportunity, you know? It's right there. And once you figure it out and you learn it, you just get it. And I get it now. I get it. I didn't understand it at first, but now I've been there and I get it.
So one of the goals of the next moon landing is to put the first woman on the moon. I mean, when it was announced, the vice president's like, we're gonna
Mm.
land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. And I think a lot of people walk away from that thinking that that's like the entire purpose of the mission. Just like maybe the first time was to beat the Russians. So I guess two questions for you. One is, what do you think about that? And second of all, do you think there's any risk of some public support disappearing after that first landing because they'll be like, you accomplished it?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's actually a lot within the whole sending a woman to the moon. It's very loaded, and it'll take me like a couple hours to explain why. um, it's like there's a whole process behind it, and all these multi layers, and the importance, and how, and it's good. I mean, it's great, but we should have been doing this. It never should have stopped. And there's so many societal things. And like what I'm trying to say is it's very hard for me to comment on it in a fully understandable way for everyone to understand, because it's multi-layered. And I mean, people give one-liners all the time, but it's actually really important to explain why. So it's just very hard for me because there's a lot of layers and I can't just give you something in 5 minutes. But like that soundbite, yes, it is. It's great that we're sending women to the moon. But it shouldn't have never been any other way. We should have always had thought about that. I mean, the Russians did. The Russians thought about sending women to space. We had the Mercury 13, but they were good enough to train with, but we weren't good enough to send. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna park that one because it's just a little bit harder for me to explain without getting the point fully across. But yes, it is a very good thing. As for sending someone to the moon and then the excitement dropping off, that has a lot to do with marketing and branding and social awareness and keeping the dream alive. I work in this every day. I've worked for national networks. I've worked across the US. I've done branding. I've done marketing. Like I've done it all. And you do need to keep the momentum going. But you also, and your messaging, but you also need to be careful not to make your society exhausted from it. So for instance, like we have COVID fatigue, but we're
Mhm.
also very much on high alert. So when there's a new strain, everyone freaks out and has PTSD from all the borders closing. So now everyone's freaking about this new strain when really they shouldn't be because we don't have all the information. So, and it's also the fault of the press for blowing it up. So the thing is with sending just a woman to the moon, and it's very easy for newspapers and everyone to grab at that and to talk about that point. But we also need to keep up, branding needs to keep up that all the other things that are on top of it. So even building a timeline of ideas you need to hit of what the missions are, just to keep the momentum going so people don't just grab that one simple concept and then drop it. So it's a lot of effort, and that's the problem. People, back to the whole time and money, it requires a lot of effort to keep that going. So that's another long, like couple-hour discussion as well.
Now I think you're starting to realize how my 3.5 hour interview
Yeah.
materialized. So if it was safe and affordable, would you go to space?
Um, See, I've been asked this all the time. I've been asked by a lot of people, would I go to space? Like, I mean, yeah, I would, but I actually think there's better people to go to space. And I would actually be, I think I'm better suited to be on the ground uh, in mission control, helping someone get to space. I think that's my role. And I think I would enjoy that role. But I mean, given an opportunity, sure, no problem. I'd love to go. I'd love to see it, and to talk about it and to feel it and, all those beautiful things about it. But I actually think there are better people out there that should go.
Have you considered a career in space, like becoming a flight controller or something like that?
Well, no, because I think I'm better suited now in my role that what I do now. So I've produced space documentaries. I've traveled the world covering space events. Um, I think what I do now is better suited uh, for the reach that I have and the way I can translate things. So no.
I know. I just curious because of the way you had
Yeah.
phrased I see myself in mission control, so
Yeah. Oh,
I
if because a lot of astronauts, they work in mission control and they assist with people, and you have like, basically they're just astronauts on the ground. I have friends that do it, and if I was supposed to go to space, I think that's why I'm saying I'd be better suited on the ground to help with that. That makes sense.
It does. It does. I so in terms of the branding and the marketing,
Mhm.
if you could give advice to NASA on what they should do, what would it be?
Oh, I love NASA. NASA is actually the best brand. Well, NASA and Coca-Cola are probably the two best brands in the world. There's not a day that goes by that I don't see someone wearing a NASA shirt. So I think they've done really well with that. I think they've done extremely well with the NASA social program and social media. I think they're absolute kingpins when it comes to that. But I think we also need to look at the complete picture of it all and to use those channels and to keep the dream going. You're going to have your normal people, or not normal people, what I mean by normal space enthusiasts that are going to love NASA, if it's good, or if it, then you have like the other people that don't really know anything about it. And they're the ones that you need to keep. So in television, in marketing and TV, we always said need to invite new viewers. So NASA needs to do, and they did a great inviting new viewers with the NASA social program, bringing in writers like children book authors, teachers. I was just a travel blogger at the time and I got to go. So I think they do a great job when it comes to diversity. But it's as with the messaging, it's just keeping those channels open and looking for the most interesting part of the mission and honing in on that. So for the first one, it's landing a woman on the moon. But what's the second mission? Like, what's the most important thing? You almost need like that road plan so you can keep hitting at it and keep hinting. And you have to do a campaign. So people don't get fatigue of just one thing. They kind of latch on to the next one and latch on to the next one.
Hmm. That's definitely going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions I had. Is there anything that you wanted to add or any questions you had for me?
Oh gosh. I think what you're doing is really cool. I actually thought about this and I went, you could totally produce something from this. I love what you're doing. I love how you're asking people every day. I just thought it was such a cool project because it's something not everyone thinks about, and it's intense because you're asking these people every single day. You're asking one person every day, and it takes a lot of guts to do that because I'm a producer and I know like what's involved. So I think what you're doing is actually amazing, and that's why I wanted to be a part of this project, because it's like it's just mind-boggling, like the amount of footage you have. um there's a lot there. So I just want to say thank you for even thinking and coming up with this concept. It's a great idea.
I really appreciate that. And, I have over 1,000 more days to get through. So if you know of anybody else that would be willing to have a conversation, especially maybe people who don't even think about space, hopefully you can send them my way.
Well, here's the thing. I run the People of Space account, and it's people of space. It's not people in space. It's not experts or astronauts or engineers. I'm actually hosting the account this week to tell people what it's about. And I think that might be a really great place to start. So let me speak with some of the people on that account and see if they would be interested. But yeah, I believe that space is for all. It's not for the elite. It's not for just the smart people. I think it encompasses every one of us because we're just a marble floating around in the middle of the void. Who are we? So it is for all. Space is for all, and people just need to realize that. And yes, it is attainable. It's attainable how you make it attainable. you know um you don't have to go to space to be involved in space. You don't have to go to the rocket launch to be in space. Like, you can be involved with it right here from your computer, talking to people, and everybody is so lovely and nice. Like, they're willing to talk to you. I think the space community on social media is one of the nicest ones I have ever met. Everyone's so helpful and loving, and I'm so thankful for it. So there you go.
I really appreciate that, Tara. And I hope you
Always.
have a good day and look forward to staying in touch.
Oh, sounds good. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye bye.
Yeah, bye.